Player 3 here, going back to medieval times to live out the legend of Robin Hood in The Legend of Robin Hood, Conquests of the Longbow. The Legend of Robin Hood, Conquests of the Longbow, is the second and final game in the Conquests of series, a series of games designed by Christy Marks, developed and published through Sierra Online, the first of which being Conquests of Camelot, the search for the Grail. Just like Conquests of the Longbow, Conquests of Camelot's story is referenced by many literary sources. In the case of Conquests of the Longbow, referencing 28 different literary sources for the game's content. If you are a novice of Robin Hood lore as I was going into this game, then there are definitely characters and elements that you will find familiar, such as Friar Tuck, Little John, Maid Marian, and Robin disguised as Puck at the archery tournament, winning by shooting his arrow clean through the center of his opponent's arrow. But the tales of Robin Hood go way beyond that, and I was pleased as how much there truly was to the legend. But though you may think that the game then must be boring and a straightforward telling of what the books and such say, but that is not the case. Every action you take in the game has a consequence. Yes, there is a set story path, but there are many ways to go about it. How you interact with people, elements you use when and where, and in the end you are graded on how well you did in multiple different aspects throughout the game, leaving you with 4 possible endings. Let's take it back a little further. As I mentioned, the game was designed by Christy Marks. In the late 1980s, she was contacted by Sierra Online, who were searching for artists. She herself being a writer and her husband at the time, Peter, being an artist, Sierra accepted the offer of the writer-artist duo. Christy asked Sierra whether she would hold rights to any original IP, but as the corporate system usually works, Sierra Online would retain it all. So she began to think of existing IPs to turn into a game. Adventure games being at its most prevalent, this was the genre to strive for. Christy was told by Sierra that a King Arthur game would be a good idea, so she gathered as much information as she could, and Conquests of Camelot, The Search for the Grail was born. After releasing Conquests of Camelot, Christy began to think of a sequel. Not a direct one, as in another King Arthur game, but another mythological legend sort of game. With the slew of Robin Hood movies emerging at the time, it was hard to avoid the topic. Christy was pleased with the idea. She loved the stories of Robin Hood and archery. This was a perfect fit, and just like Conquests of Camelot, extensive research was required to pull this off. And just like I did while playing the game, she too learned much more about the legend while researching it, including reaching out to sources in Nottingham for further local information on the legend, such as the ancient pub beside the castle and the sandstone tunnels beneath the castle, some of which I had the pleasure of seeing myself when I traveled to England last summer, visiting Nottingham for, well, it has the headquarters of Warhammer 40k's Games Workshop, my favorite football club Nottingham Forest, and seeing the castle and the Robin Hood statue outside of it. You could say I'm a bit of a Robin Hood fan as well. Without further ado, let's jump into the game. But before that, a quick look at the manual. In the case of Conquest of the Longbow, the manual and the hint book. The manual covers everything from the reason for the game and the history of the Legend of Robin Hood to useful tables of possible encounterable items, and a very thorough tutorial section to guide you through how to play the game for the first part of the first day, including recommending a certain part for which to save the game, as it is your first of many choices that impact the game. Then there is the hint book, which, as its name says, it is a book of hints to help you along if you get really stuck throughout the game. And might I add, this hint book is extremely detailed. I tried my best to figure out every puzzle that stumped me, but a few times I had to reference this hint book, and it has every possible question and answer to solve it that you could think of in the game. In the game now, the first tutorial area, as the manual says, the click-through. When the game begins, you'll find yourself standing in your cave, which lies inside the outlaw camp. Click the eye cursor onto various objects in the cave to gather information about what is there that you might want. Click the hand cursor onto the horn. The horn is now in your inventory. Like I said, very thorough, guiding you up through saving this peasant woman from one of the sheriff's men. This, you will notice, increases your score, with the maximum, a perfect score, being 7,325. Also along the top HUD being how many outlaws are amongst Robin Hood's merry men, and the ransom collected thus far to save King Richard. The object of the game being that King Richard the Lionheart was captured during a battle in Europe and is held ransom, and while he is away, the tyrant Prince John is trying to usurp the throne, while locally in Nottingham, the Sheriff of Nottingham is aiding Prince John in his tyrannical efforts. So Robin Hood and his merry men must gather enough ransom money to free the king and restore order and justice to the throne while avoiding the watchful eye of the Sheriff of Nottingham. In the settings menu, you will find on the left options to save the game, restore previous save states, restarting the game, quitting the game, and closing this window to return to playing the game. Then to the right, 4 sliders. Detail for if your computer can't handle all the high quality graphics, the 4K resolution, and ray tracing. The volume, the speed in which Robin walks, meow, and arcade, which controls the scoring system, a difficulty setting, and setting it all the way to the bottom being essentially no fail mode. Now this score that you attain throughout the game is one of the many elements you are graded on at the end of the game to play towards which of the 4 endings you end up with. The other 3 elements being the amount of ransom raised to rescue King Richard, the number of outlaws remaining, and the 4th element, which I'll tell you about later since I'd say it's in spoiler territory. There isn't too much else to do on day 1 but explore the main hub areas of Nottinghamshire, which you can fast travel to by clicking the map icon, which I wish I realized was the thing before losing my mind aimlessly exploring Sherwood Forest. The only place you need to visit on day 1 that isn't a fast travel spot is the Shooting Glade, where you will familiarize yourself with how the first-person archery mechanic works, as you will need to know how to do it very accurately later in the game, which may take some time to get used to as the wind and distance play a factor in how the arrow travels. Once you have completed all that, the game will end the day for you. No need to double or triple check if you have exhausted all necessary events of the day. Once you have, the screen will go black and text will appear, telling you the happenings of that evening before joining your men at the campsite, then retiring for the evening, or jumping straight to waking up in your cave the next morning. I will say, shout out to Call of Cthulhu on this one aspect. Even though the rest of the game was pretty meh, there were small bars at the bottom of the screen to walk through to travel to areas below the current screen. For this game, it was a bit annoying at times having to traverse the forest without such guides. Nevertheless, day 1 has ended, with Robin Hood passing out drunk and spewing his woes of not being able to find a good woman as he lives the life of an outlaw, always in hiding. Then he has a dream. A very real dream in a grove of willows. The most beautiful woman he has ever seen is dancing among the trees. Then, as he approaches, she disappears as the willows whisper her name, Marion. All that remains is a heart-shaped emerald, broken in half. Robin wakes up, day 2, with a terrible hangover. But what is this? Well then, was it really a dream? Robin is sharing this news with his men when Will arrives with news of King Richard, and Robin must sneak into town to the cobbler who can shed light on the matter. You must bring him a woman's slipper as a secret password so he knows Robin can be trusted. But how do we sneak into town unnoticed? And how do we get the slipper? Great question. Figure it out for yourself. Nah, it's not that hard. You just have to wander Sherwood Forest until you find Marion being attacked by a monk in a black robe. Think fast. If you take too long, Marion will die. All you have to do is to shoot the monk, then Marion gives you the slipper. That's really it for day 2. Day 3 now. You must go to the Watling Street Overlook and stop a beggar walking the street. You buy his clothes off him, and now you have your disguise to enter Nottingham safely without being caught. At this point, I'm going to say we are entering spoiler territory, so if you want to avoid it, skip to this time here. You can click the timestamp in the description. When clicking on Nottingham to fast travel, or walking there by foot, it will pull up a map of different locations to drop into in the town. The obvious one to reach now, the cobbler, Lob, being the one titled Cobbler. Here you meet Lob. And upon giving him the secret token, the slipper, he leads you to the back of his shop to speak in secret. King Richard is held ransom for 100,000 gold. Queen Eleanor is trying to raise the money to pay the ransom, but wicked Prince John is seeing to it that she is not able to raise that amount. Prince John has taken 50,000 gold meant to be used for the ransom, and stolen it away and given it to the Abbot of Nottingham for him to pocket for himself. As luck would have it, the money hasn't reached the Abbot yet, but will be traveling to Nottingham in the near future, and Robin agrees to seize it and deliver it to the Queen. Lob gives Robin a silver comb as another token of trust that he must give to Marion next time he sees her to signal that this plan is in motion. I couldn't find a specific call out to who exactly wrote the dialogue in this game. I believe it was Christie, but man, I love the dialogue. Well-mannered when it needs to be, or witty, or funny, just very well written. And I don't feel a need to click to further the dialogue to the next panel. Each one is timed based on how long the text is, and it's timed well. It was also at this point that I started speaking the words aloud and gave each character a unique voice. I was starting to have a lot of fun with it. Not much happens on day 4, just more setting up the story. Day 5, however, we were given another choice. Not a huge one, however, but this one is which one we want to tackle first. Both a monk in brown robes walks down Wildling Street at the same time as a fen monk in black. Whichever one you choose on that day, 5 or 6, will determine what you have to do that day. For me, I got the brown-robed monk, not really by choice. I clicked on the street, and that's who I got. And after I threatened the monk and had Friar Tuck beat his ass while he worked for us, I got his robes. So I have another way to sneak into the town. Naturally, I went to the abbey and was let right in. Here we get a different art style, a top-down while inside the abbey. Forget all that because we're going straight out the back of the abbey, and there's a labyrinth. Man, if the church I went to as a kid had a labyrinth in the back, that would have been so sick. As long as it didn't have any hidden witches burning stakes in the back like this one. Then around this time, the game said I had enough, because I really wasn't doing shit. So, I guess day 5 is done. The next day, I can meet the fine fen monk on Watling Street now. I'd rather go back to the other monk, actually. This guy's a dick. And the only way to steal his clothes, that seems to be the purpose of intercepting people at this crossing, is to fight him. And I died. Okay, there we go. Now, off to the monastery. Boy, this place is a far cry from the cheeky town of Nottingham. Inside and out, because inside, we find a friendly little man being tortured. And apparently, he is King Richard's court jester, Fulk. The task was to steal back his scroll with a top-secret message on it, along with the scroll Marion told us to retrieve and get out of there, which was a little trickier than I expected. Eventually I figured it out, and now we are at day 7, dawn of the halfway point. Here's when stuff starts to get good. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Except that Marion won't give Robin a kiss. This guy can't catch a break. Man, shut down at every turn. But it's okay, because I'm a tree now. Now the main event on day 8, the Saturday Fair. After delivering the scroll to the man with the right suit of arms, we can enter the archery tournament, and you have to win in the best way, like the legend, shooting your arrow right through your opponent's arrow. And hey, finally an increase in our ransom collection. But now, we've used so many disguises while visiting Nottingham that the sheriff has started sending out men to search Sherwood Forest to find Robin and his outlaws. So on day 9 here, you need to use your druid magic that the green man bestowed on you and hide amongst the druid groves. That sounds like Echo. That sound came straight from Echo. You cannot tell me otherwise. Wait, this game came up before Echo. Oh no! Echo took from Conquests of the Longbow. What's happening here? I literally can't find any information about this. My guess is that the same sound designer worked for both games and reused the sound, or someone else took inspiration of this game, or they used the same sound effect software or effect instrument. Moving on. We catch another unfortunate traveler, which we, as you can guess, took their clothes. Then we absolutely bamboozle the sheriff and his wife and make a fool out of the man. Good times. Then on day 10, I need to go to the witch's court to rescue Marion, only to realize once I reached the secret passageway under the chapel and saved the game, that I was supposed to gather my outlaws together to form a plan to save her together, because if I go alone, I will die. But since I only had one save state, and every time I tried to go back to the camp or go outside, I would get caught and die, and the only way around this was to restart the game. Not from the beginning of the day, which I really, really hoped was the case, but the whole game. And I had been playing the game for nearly 7 hours at this point. Needless to say, upset doesn't even describe how I felt once I realized this. So I took a break, got some Taco Bell, then I realized, wait, didn't I have something similar to me happen in Secret of Monkey Island? And yes, almost the exact same scenario actually happened. Just like in Secret Monkey Island, I was about 3/4 of the way through the game. I stupidly saved the game in one save slot and in an area that locked me out of simply going around the issue, and had to start the entire game over to get back to where I was. So then my rage turned to relief. I still had many hours to replay, more than I had to do with Secret of Monkey Island, but even with that issue, Secret of Monkey Island is my favorite game so far in this series. So maybe this is some sign that the game is one of my favorites too, this game. Because before this happened, this game was looking like a top 3 favorite from me. And to be honest, though this sounds like I'm reflecting on what I had gone through previously, maybe weeks before telling you this, but when I'm typing this into my script, right after eating my Taco Bell, right after my revelation, and before even replaying 7 hours of this game, I'm still optimistic. And the more I write, the more my mood is changing and realizing I still love this game. No spoilers for the rating. I still don't know at this point what the final rating will be as of writing this, but this is a massive moment in my playthrough. But we're nearly done. I was so close before that incident. Now that I have played back through to day 10, I have to hear the men's plans, and to me, Tux sounds the best. Okay, maybe walking into the fire wasn't the best idea. Oh, the fire ring. Oh, hold on, let's try this again. Hell yeah. Okay, finally, the end is nigh. The treasure Lob told us about is finally passing down Waddling Street. How do we stop them? Well, let's go with Tuck's plan again, baby! But let's say you went with Will's plan, or Alan's plan, or even John's plan. They still work, but much? Ooh, not so much. Terrible, in fact. To think I even considered this plan originally as a possibility, wow. But we got it. The 50,000 gold. That surely should be enough to save the king now. Well, if the archery tournament didn't anger the sheriff, or sending him out naked on his horse back to town, this will have angered him greatly. Because on day 12, he sends his men out a-hunting again, and this time, there's hardly any time to react. But it's okay, because I'm a tree again. Cue the echo sound. Now that we are free to roam again, let's go back to the spooky monastery. But this time, the game will crash. Okay, let's try that again. And climb the vines to rescue the real Queen's Knight to deliver the ransom money to. Then play this arcade sequence to avoid the rocks. That took me more attempts than any other sequence like this in the game somehow. And that's it. Now we sit back and see how we did in the trial. This is how it ended for me. My merry men speak well of me, telling King Richard how we stole only from the corrupt to bring him back. Then the abbot, prior, and sheriff speak poorly of us, naturally. Folk stepping in and speaking on our behalf as well. Then the real meat and potatoes, the people we encountered and made those tough choices along the way, come forward to testify for or against us depending on how our interactions went. Luckily, more were in my favor because Robin and his merry men were pardoned. All is well. The sheriff remains, but maybe he will reform himself while the king is returned. At least the prior is exiled with punishment of death if he ever tries to return. And that's it. That's a win. But Troubadour Allen says otherwise. He says to play again and try better. That's because that ending was the second to worst. You know, you could have fooled me. I know my score was maybe slightly over halfway to the max, but second worst still? The elements graded on, I covered at the beginning of this video, all but the last element, which is the number of people who testify against Robin at Robin's trial. With everything I got, I could have definitely done worse, such as not saving Marion, fighting and killing people dishonorably, choosing terrible strategies that my merry men come up with, the worst outcome being that Robin Hood is hanged. That's definitely a loss, so I guess I won, but I could have really won. The outcome won better than mine, being the same except that Robin and his men are all given positions in the king's service, and the sheriff, the abbot, and the prior are punished. Then the best possible outcome, which compared to everything else truly is winning the game, is everything previously, but Robin is knighted as Earl of Huntingdon. The sheriff is arrested and replaced with Little John. The prior and abbot are exiled. Friar Tuck becomes the new abbot, and his first act is marrying Robin to Marion. And that's the only ending that doesn't tell you to try better as your next playthrough as Robin Hood. But anyways, my first playthrough I've done so far, the one for the footage in this video, this is the score for each of those categories. If you have played the game before or intend to play it, let me know your scores. I'd love to know how you did. Oh, one more thing. I gotta bring up the Easter eggs, specifically told to search for in the hint book after you've completed the game. Well, let's try these. The first one they have listed, clicking the hand cursor along the top of the Nottingham Castle battlement above the outside of the pub. What do you get? Well, after getting it precisely in this one spot, you see a cowl get launched out and over to the town below. I love it. A very nice nod to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Next it says, shooting a wood imp with your bow. Oh, shit, they drop a bag of gold. Oh, well, I'm tiny now. I guess for Robin, the forest grew. Then walking right and back again along the shore outside the Fens Monastery. Well, nothing's happening. Oh my god, it's Nessie! Oh, it's awesome! Oh, what else? There's a few more, and even a few more than that they didn't even list that you have to discover for yourself. And not all of them I was able to make happen, but they are all possible. You gotta love some Easter eggs, come on. And they are all so fun too. This game's great. If you can't tell already, I really enjoyed this game. But what did everyone else think on release? Well, from what it seems, most reviews for the game at the time are near perfect reviews, which is odd when considering that it has been almost lost to time. A hidden gem, if you will. It did well, but nowhere near as well as the King's Quest and Larry Adventure games that Sierra was known for. But I agree with those reviews, because I too thought that The Legend of Robin Hood: Conquests of the Longbow was a near perfect game. In fact, I'm giving it the best possible rating I've allowed myself so far to give any game I played in the series. Because there's no such thing as a perfect 10 out of 10 game, it's tied now with The Secret of Monkey Island, a 9.5 out of 10. I fucking love this game. I knew from the moment I started sitting back and letting the dialogue play out on its own and speaking it aloud with unique voices for each character that I had found another favorite. I've only played a handful of Sierra games. I've always thought of them as one of my favorite game companies, despite having only played a few though. But my favorite game of theirs, actually my favorite game of all time, being Grant Lee Sherman Civil War Generals 2. I've played that game since I was a kid. I loved it then and I still love it now. And that's why I won't be doing a retro rewind on it, because I know it will become the game at the top of my favorites and never get overthrown. But now with Conquests of the Longbow, I found another Sierra game that I love. I'm sure that there are games of theirs that suck, but so far I've gotten lucky. I'm just sad that they don't exist anymore. But anyways, that's that. First game of the year, and it's going to be a hard one to top. Plenty of games to go though, and at least one that was a recommendation from one of you. So if you have any game recommendations, leave them in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll enjoy what I have in store. That's all for now. See you next time.